all dogs, I tell my pet classes, they should be able to get a BH. A BH is not owned by Schutzen. And this is where people always mix up. Like there used to be gunfire on the BH. Actually, in the old days, you didn't have to get a BH, you just go to one. But they got rid of gunfire, 15 years ago? I don't even know, 10 years ago?
2012.
2012, all right, 12 years ago. They got rid of the gunfire, and I was against it. And then I talked to the Germans. They're like, why are you against it? I'm like, well, it shows the temperament. They said, well, why does an agility person need gunfire? Why does a herding person? I'm like, oh, you're right. They changed my mind on that because a BH is entry into dog sport in Europe. So it's a very important title. I mean, it's very important test because you're not doing fly ball or whatever rally or I don't know, whatever your sport is. You're not Schutzen, you're not doing it without your BH. So let's talk protection because all dogs should be able to a degree, track, and all dogs should be able to do obedience. Not all dogs can do protection. Protection has to be from here. I did this with a guy named Bob. I had this guy, he had this American show dog, wasn't really good, and I was like 28 years old because dogs bite in 3 drives. They bite in defense, they bite in prey, or they bite in fight. I'll explain those 3 drives. So this dog didn't have prey, but he had defense, and I was like 28, I was trying to get my theories in order. I said, I want to know if I can get this dog to work straight in defense, which I'm going to call the unhappy window. And I did it, and the dog became aggressive. He became so aggressive, I was so nervous if somebody jumped the fence, he'd kill him. It was the dumbest thing I ever did, and I'll never do that again. Because what is defense? Defense is a rattlesnake. If I'm walking up and I hear a rattlesnake, whoa, I'll actually turn my back to the rattlesnake because what does the rattlesnake want? The threat to go away. That is defense. What is prey? The chasing of something. That's why when the cop said prey drive is a weak drive, because defense is aggression. Prey's a weak drive. I said, well, tell that to a polar bear. I'm like, no, it's not. You have 6 parts of prey drive. You have eyeing the prey, you have chasing the prey, you have gripping the prey, you have counter, kill the prey, we call it tug of war, but the counter. You have dismember and consumption that we obviously never get into. So we don't want, yeah, that's what their little mallet was trying to eat the toy. But we want to interrupt it. That's why we hold the dog dead prey under the mouth where the dog can relax. And so prey is going to be called what I call the happy window. Defense is the unhappy window. There are several parts of prey drive. Several types of prey drive. You can have prey play, which is like a yellow lab that likes to chase the ball. That's different than prey aggression. Prey aggression is the drive I'm going to talk about for protection. That's different, where the dog is actively aggressive. But you have to teach your dog the light switch is off. So when I say sit, the game stops. It will continue again. That's the control. Do you know I've never been bit by a Schutzen dog in my life, unwarranted? I've been bit a lot where leashes break, handlers mess up. I've never had a Schutzen dog ever in my whole life ever just come bite me. Do you know how many times I've been bit by my pet client's dogs? Walking too close. Never. But I also correlated to this. If you have a Ferrari, you don't rev your engine next to a VW Bug. You know you're going to win. If you have a UFC fighter, usually they're pretty chill. They're not going into bar fights. No. They know they can take anybody. So when you have a very confident dog, so I'm talking about confidence. What did I do to Bob's dog? I made him not confident. It was bad training. So if you picture something called conflict, I don't mind conflict. I mind unresolved conflict. Conflict's part of the game. There was a lady that I traded with, Ann Boyce. No one knows Ann.
I remember Ann Boyce.
She was a great friend, and I gave her a hard time. She said, one time her dog's in the blind, see, Joel, no conflict. I'm like, why would there be conflict? Your dog doesn't foos? Plots, sit, out. Why would there be conflict? I told her, I said, Ann, my kids have no conflict when I say eat your chocolate cake. Now, how about clean your room? Conflict. So I don't mind conflict. So you picture a young dog chasing a cat across the field. It's a what? Prey drive. Prey is quiet. The dog is chasing the cat quiet. It might maybe making a little yipping sound, but not barking. The cat goes to the corner and hisses. The dog will go in conflict. Say it doesn't have the wherewithal to kill the cat. It will bark, trying to get what to happen again? Prey.
Prey. Yeah.
So, our program teaches barking makes movement. Barking makes the pheasant fly, the rabbit run, the human jump. Barking, it's a catalyst that causes something to occur. So it's not just barking like for a cookie. Giblow, giblow, active barking. There's nothing wrong with teaching your dog giblow for a cookie. I'm not saying that. But what we're looking for in protection is a dominant bark where the dog is dominating the human. So we look at the hold and bark as something different than a dog perceives it. I was thinking about this one time driving. We're like, well, just go into that teepee looking thing called a blind and just bark, dog. That's hard. When dogs come in the blind and they're real dirty and they bite, three things are going on. One, the dog doesn't know how to be clean. He just hasn't been taught. Another one, the dog is just being a punk, like, I'm going to kill you. And this one will surprise you. A lot of dogs come in and bite because they're insecure. Because if the dog's biting, they're in charge. But if they have to hold the guy at bay by just barking, they give up their in charge. So when they go into this space, the human is in defense. So now the prey has to, how about this? Picture a Jack Russell Terrier. Do you know the wherewithal they have to go into a hole and kill an animal that's in defense? I mean, you got to be a tough little animal, like a badger or whatever. You got to be tough to go into a hole and kill something that is defending themselves and their territory. Well, I'm in this hole and the dog's coming in. That's a lot harder I hope that makes sense to you. That's a harder exercise than people think. That's why it's 15 points, the hold and bark. Because it's not just come in and bark. And by the way, it's 15 points. That's broken up in two parts. 10 for the hold and 5 for the bark. So if a dog just comes in and stares intently, it's intense, I'm only supposed to be able to take off maximum 5 points. Because the hold, does that make sense? It's broken up into two parts. All right. So we want hardness with our dogs. So what would be something called courage? You're walking down a dark alley in a foreign area that you don't know, and you know there's a worthy adversary, or perhaps there's going to be a worthy adversary. Just going to the dark alley, you have courage. Now there's an adversary that says, you're not coming through here. And you're like, it's going to be a good day. I get to fight today. And I'm going to go in there, and you're not telling me not to go through this alley. So you're actively like ready to fight. That's fight drive. Now you get your butt kicked in the fight, and the next day you come back to that same alley. That's called hardness. We want our dogs to have hardness. What's going on with the sport is I disagree if we're creating soft dogs. So where would hardness take place? A helper steps on the dog's foot in the middle of a drive and crunches it. And the dog comes off. Well, yeah, the helper messed up and should have stepped on the foot, but the dog should have what? Been hard and got even more mad that they got stepped on. Not softer. So through training and genetics we want to create hardness. So there's several parts of those. But when you get, and I'm going to give Jane England credit on this one, when you have hardness and you have drive and a really good dog, you have three things that you can do. You have leaking drive, then you have to suppress that in order to cap that. So let me explain this in an analogy. I taught eighth grade, so everything's an analogy. I have a warm soda plastic bottle with Coke, and I shake it up on a hot day, and I put a pin in it. This energy is leaking. It's leaking out. So when you see the Malinois that's doing a little bit of that whining, it's leaking drive. We want to suppress drive. So you have the warm soda bottle, put a pin in it, it's leaking. You unscrew the lid and take some of the energy out. Now it's going to stop leaking as much. So you want to suppress it. The best thing that we want to get is to capping drive. So capping drive, I find this very interesting. Picture the escape bite, you guys. Even dogs that leak, you know where they never leak? On the escape bite. They're capped. And almost always you'll see, even on a hot day, their mouth closed. That's called capped drive. So I correlate it to this. You have a boiling pot of water, and the steam is dissipating in all directions, and you put a lid on it. Now it's capped. You give a command. Here, bring Schnell to go bite on the escape bite. Now the energy is directed. So if you have a dog that, and it's not a Rottweiler thing, really. Rottweilers don't leak. It's really bad in the Shepherd world and the Malinois world. They leak. And we're always addressing it. So I'm probably preaching to the choir. You guys are like, what are you talking about, Joel? My dog doesn't leak. But if you ever do get a Rottweiler of high drive leak, I want you to remember that though. You leaking drive, you suppress the drive. And how do I suppress it? I get a dominant collar, a slip lead, and I'll lift up and say quiet. And I'll wait for 3 seconds. And I'll put it back down. Good, quiet. And I'll feed a fix. Yes, and I'll maybe pay food. So that dog that you just saw me working, that Malinois right there, what would be my game plan, you think, in the next week?